I'm Rick Bine at IUPUI in the Geography Department. Before coming to IUPUI, I had the good fortune of being able to teach at the University of Khartoum in Sudan, right here where the Blue Nile and the White Nile meet. Polygamy is throughout Africa. It is the Quran allows for a man to have up to 4 wives. Even in the Old Testament, polygamy occurs in a number of circumstances. In sub-Saharan Africa, the tradition goes back thousands of years. I will describe the circumstances in Sudan and South Sudan and Mozambique. I'll show you on the map. There's South Sudan, Mozambique, Western Sudan, and South Sudan. So all 4 of these areas, there's examples of polygamy that I'll talk about in detail. I spent this time in the 1970s. I don't believe too much has changed since then. But polygamy serves mostly the very wealthy and the very poor, but not the middle class or the high school educated. Normally the middle class is represented by more educated people, some who have studied abroad and have adopted Western ways, but also feel that they can't afford such a large family. In the harem, the wealthy wives are treated like royalty. Usually they are sequestered in their luxury only to interact with their husband and close family. In the poor wives, the wives become laborers. Anyway, here's how it goes when you got the 4 wives, or you have just one wife. The first wife, if she's by herself, is very isolated. And she doesn't have anyone to talk to. The men don't talk to their women. They talk to other men. And so this is a real problem. And so to save her some problem, she might complain about being bored, and the husband will say, okay, get another wife. And she'll be up to her to find a second wife. Usually it's a cousin or or a sister or something like that. And so he's not particularly opposed to this, and so the additional wife comes along. The Arab man often finds himself married to a group of sisters or former classmates of the first wife. Sudanese marriage is a very important part of the life here. Of course, it is everywhere, but here it details with this process of marriage. The parents quite frequently arrange the marriage. One of my students, I knew. He hadn't told me all this, and I'd known him for a while. He came in one day and says, I'm getting married tomorrow. You want to come? Wow. Is this just so sudden? You haven't told me about that. And he says, oh, yeah. I says, how did you meet her? I mean, what's this going on? He says, well, how long have you known her? And he says, well, since I was 6 years old. How's that? Well, she and I played together when we were little kids. And our parents decided that we should get married. And so when we reached puberty, we were separated. We never saw each other since then. And her parents had her circumcised and infibulated when her clitoris and labia were removed and the vaginal opening partly sutured. This mutilation keeps the woman from enjoying the sex act, indicating that sex is for reproduction only. On their wedding night, he killed a chicken whose blood was to show that he had broken her virginity with a sex act. In reality, she needed to go into surgery to correct her mutilated vagina. It was 6 months before they could have intercourse. So sub-Saharan Africa, polygamy is a normal occurrence. It serves as a social security system for women. First place, it's hard to find a husband. I mean, the reason for that is boys are less likely to survive until adulthood. Often the man isn't financially able to support a wife. And one of the things is that children are assets. So the woman wants to have children. That's who's going to take care of her. It doesn't matter whether she loves him or not. But also the children take care of her in her old age as assets, so they help out around the house. It's very risky to marry a single man because you don't know if he's any good. And so this is but this is also part of the woman's esteem too. If she has a lot of children, she's going to be one of the village elders who everybody looks up to. In these case studies, I ran into a man who had 2 wives. We were invited to come out to his place up a little north of Sudan, and Mary and I visited there. We visited with the family and whatever, and we were introduced to the 2 wives, and they had their own jobs. The first wife, her job was to take care of the kitchen, and she was cooking and doing all this stuff, very busy. The second wife was to host us, and she hosted us in her room. Normally, I wouldn't be able to go in there as a single person, single man, but since my wife was with me, and I had to interview her because my wife didn't speak Arabic, so I was able to not only ask the questions my wife wanted to know, but also my questions. So the assumption was that one of the things that was a concern was, before I get to that, one of the things that we found was we asked her about all the equality there. How do are you treated differently? And she says, oh no, we're great. We have a good time. We like each other, the 2 wives, and we're treated very much the same. This bedroom you're in is painted identical to her bedroom, and all the same furniture. And so she took us over there, and we looked, and there it was. You couldn't tell. I was in the same room again. That was the way it looked. And so apparently they're maintained in certain identical situations. And so we had that communication, and the second case is in a state of Sudan called Darfur. Darfur is over here in western Sudan, close to the Chad border. And I was traveling over there, and you could see the pictures of the man with his 4 wives and teenage son building a house. He was up on the scaffolding with his son, and they were putting the bricks on and putting the mortar on, and the wives were carrying things up the ladder. They were on their heads, and some of them had babies on their backs, and they would bring the bricks up and the mortar and all that, and then one wife was mixing the hod so that the other 2 wives could take it up, and so that was an interesting relationship they had there. So there was a team. They had this workforce of 6 of them working together, and they were getting a job done. And it probably goes a lot same way with farming too. The women are doing most of the farming. And now my third example is in South Sudan, down here, but it's on the White Nile only. Here I went with my students to his home. They were very happy to have their professor come down there, and as I was getting to know the community, the local high school teacher who spoke English, very good English, he was teaching English there, and that's what his job was. And he had 2 wives, and then he told me he was a practicing Roman Catholic. I says, well, how can the church allow that? And then he says, this is Africa. And anyway, he was on the deanery board. He was very high level in the church, but the churches are able to accommodate previous traditions and don't say too much about it. And then I asked him this question: how is it having 2 wives? And he just sat there for a minute. He didn't answer me right away. And maybe 40 seconds later, he says, don't do it. I never have any peace. It's hard to keep everything equal. I have to do this for one, I have to do it the other, and it never ends. I'm constantly catching up here and catching up there. After I got back to Khartoum, back to the university, I shared this with some of my Sudanese friends, and they got a chuckle out of that, and they said, he needs 2 more wives. I said, why is that? And he says, well, one wife is lonely because the husband only talks to other men. So finally she invites a friend to join the harem. Usually it's a sister or cousin, high school friend or whatever. But then when there's just 2 wives, they gang up on the husband. And they pick him apart because they all want to be treated equally. When there are 3 wives, 2 wives end up ganging up on 1 wife. So there's no peace there. When you have 4 wives, you have the perfect balance. For having children is the important thing. Loving a man is not so important. So with all those wives, the man's role is to keep them pregnant. Now, in the 4th example, and this was a few years later, I was already at IUPUI in the mid-2005 or 6, something like that. I was in Mozambique, down here, in the very southern part of it, this city called Maputo. And I went out to one of the villages there. This guy had 2 wives, a whole bunch of children. You can see that in the picture. And but they went to work. They had older children that to take care of the younger ones. So the wife went to work in different types of jobs for other people. The brighter boys could go off to school, so they would get educated and maybe get jobs and able to support the family in other ways. The girls would wait around home taking care of the younger children until they could get their husbands. So polygamy in Africa is over a millennium time. It's a working system. And it's a current social system where women are subservient. There is safety in polygamy. Women are secure with their children as resources, as household maids, farm laborers, and for caretakers in her old age.